is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The High Lord by Trudy Canavan, brought to you by Ashleigh. Chapters 24, 25, and 26. In these chapters, Sonea and Akkarin finally decide to get together. And on the one hand, I don't want this. On the other hand, I'm kind of glad it's been gotten over with. Other stuff happens too. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to this show, everybody. I am Natasha. This episode was just like, or these chapters, I should say. There was a lot of what feels like setup happening here. Like we're in that cycle. Because I feel like a lot of books run in that direction. Not necessarily 3 chapter cycles, but that does tend to be a pattern I see a lot. Where there are 3 chapters of a lot of action and a lot of revelations, and then there are 3 chapters of asking questions, setting up for action to take place soon, things like that. And this section is a lot of setting up and reminding us of the stakes, I feel like. So 24 begins with Dannyl's hearing. That makes it sound like he's the one that's going to be on the stand, but the hearing is for the rebels. And it's a really weird scene because I expected there to be more, I guess I expected a revelation here. I thought that by the time somebody went to trial that there would be some extra piece of information that maybe Dannyl didn't know that was suddenly going to be revealed by somebody on the stand as an extra. Either it was a lie that they were putting out there in order to try and save themselves, or it was something that they were trying not to reveal until they had no other choice. And instead, everybody tells the story that we know already. And just one of them, the Dem, is completely fixated on whether or not Dannyl is actually a lad, and tries to insinuate that if Dannyl is willing to lie about that, then he isn't going to be telling the truth about anything else either. I want to read exactly what it is that Dannyl says. The hatred in Royan's eyes was new. The Dem had been angry on the night of the arrest, but during the journey to Karelia and the wait for the hearing, that anger must have matured into something stronger. I can understand his hatred, Dannyl thought. I tricked him. He doesn't care that I was acting under Akkarin's orders or that he was breaking the law. He just sees me as the man who ruined his dreams. So, Dannyl comes up and he makes his statement. 7 weeks ago, I received orders from the High Lord to find and arrest a group of rebels, yada, yada, yada. The audience went silent as Dannyl told his tale. So he avoids, let's see, where is it? He considered how much he had to reveal, when it came to explaining how he had convinced the rebels to trust him. The entire guild had probably heard the Dem's claims by now, so Dannyl didn't need to go into great detail. But he couldn't avoid that part of the story completely. So he told them he had arranged for the Dem to learn of a false secret so the man thought he could blackmail Dannyl. He then went on to describe his meeting with Farrand. So he does his testimony. And Farrand, when he goes and talks to the crowd, from the stand, I guess you could say, he comes across as very sympathetic. He feels like the guy who got roped into the whole thing without necessarily understanding the full consequences, or at least being manipulated for the sake of somebody else. He just comes across as somebody who is a victim in many ways as much as anyone. And in the end, they wind up essentially keeping him as a student. And he is going to be taught magic, and he's not going to be further punished, but I think he's not allowed like off the property, if I remember correctly. So then we have the Dem who comes forward, Royand. And Royand is just really pushy about whether or not Dannyl is a lad. He says he made up this story about his secret affair with his assistant. I believe it to be true. Anyone who has seen the two together would know there was more to it than just a trick. No one pretends that well. Is this the only part of his story that is incorrect? The Dem stared at Dannyl. Even Dem Tremolin, Tyann of Tremolin's father, believes it to be true. Dem Moraine, please answer the question. The Dem ignored him. Why don't you ask him if he's a lad? He swore that he'd tell the truth. I want to hear him deny it. Quito's eyes narrowed. This hearing has been called to judge whether the law against the learning of magic outside the restrictions of the guild has been broken, not whether Ambassador Dannyl has been involved in dishonorable and perverse practices. Please answer the question, Dem Moraine. Dannyl just managed to stop himself wincing. Dishonorable and perverse. No doubt the guild's opinion of him and his story would change completely if they knew the truth, and the Dem knew it. If he's lied about that, then he could have lied about everything, the Dem spat. Remember that after you've put me in my grave. I will not answer your questions. Very well, Quito said. Return to your place. I call Ashleigh of Moraine to be questioned. The Dem's wife was nervous, but cooperative. She revealed that the rebels had been meeting for 10 years, but assured the guild that their interest had been purely academic. As the other rebels were questioned, only small details about the group were revealed. They all claimed they had not intended to learn magic, only learn about it. So, yeah, in the end, they decide that they're going to, that Ferrand is guilty, but that he be offered a place in the guild. Next, do you judge that Royand of Moraine is guilty? And they all say yes. The higher magicians feel they must offer an alternative to execution. If you wish to reduce the punishment to imprisonment, turn your globes to white. Fewer than half had turned them to white, and they realize that they've ordered the execution of this guy. Which obviously Dannyl and Royand did not expect. I don't think his wife expected it. And I found this to be interesting. Like later on, I'm trying to find the exact spot for it. Forgive me, guys. Ferrand, right. Ferrand is talking to Dannyl, and he basically says, you all wanted to make an example of Akkarin because he was learning black magic. But the Dem was learning black magic as well. Akkarin, you could not make an example out of because he was too strong for you all to execute, and you knew that. And it would also be like really dangerous because of what happens when magicians die. So if that is all true, and you couldn't actually take care of him the way that you wanted to in order to make an example of him, then anyone who comes up next as having been guilty of the same thing, you are going to give the harshest punishment that you can to make an example of the next best person. And it comes down to a combo, I think, of them wanting to make an example of him when they couldn't of Akkarin, and as I think Quito says later to Dannyl, that everybody was so offended at the insinuation the Dem was making about Dannyl that they voted for a harsher punishment out of personal animosity towards him. Which, on the one hand, I feel like encouraged by, which is fucked up, because I know that means that Dannyl has risen in the esteem of his colleagues, that they would be that defensive of him, that if anyone impugns his honor, they lose credibility in the eyes of the group. That's a pretty powerful position to be in, that someone impugning your credibility is not in itself a problem. It's not going to be anything that takes him down. That makes the person accusing him look less than trustworthy. That's like, he has moved up to a new level of like low-key untouchableness. Does that work? And so on the one hand, knowing what Dannyl has been throughout most of his life and what he has had to deal with in terms of people not trusting him, I love that he has reached this point. On the other hand, he is what this guy is accusing him of. And if it comes out later that it's true what this man said, I feel like that is going to ruin Dannyl's reputation permanently. And so, like, the stakes are just so much higher than they had been in terms of him keeping this secret. And I hate that, because I had sort of hoped, you know, the whole thing was going to be that we take care of this trial and then I go back to Eileen, and Eileen is a lot more accepting of lads, and I'll be able to pretty much do what I want there, and nobody will give a shit all the way back in Karelia because it doesn't matter. But now, whether or not he's gay is actually like intertwined with this man's sentence in such a way that if he's executed and then people overhear rumors about what's going on with Dannyl and Tyann back in Eileen, I feel like that's like unforgivable for people, right? They're going to feel like he let this guy be executed, even though it shouldn't be intertwined. The fact that this man practiced black magic is supposed to be a death penalty, like by all rights and accounts. So they should not be part of the same issue. But obviously, you know, coulda, woulda, shoulda. And I'm hoping that at least when he talks to Farron later, and Farron's like, well, they wanted to make more of an example of him than they were able to with Akkarin, I'm hoping that that's actually outweighs their indignation about the accusations that the Dem made. Because if it does, then they'll be upset at what they find out about Dannyl, but they won't necessarily like feel that this man was killed for the wrong reasons. Anyway, I'm just like I'm concerned about that, because I had really hoped that after this whole thing was over, that it would be basically the way would be open for Dannyl and Tyann to be together and be unmolested. And it doesn't look like that's the case. It looks like he's going to have to keep things just as secret as before. Not to mention the fact that Dannyl does not think that this dude deserved to die. It just feels like the wrong call to him. And he's genuinely startled that that's the vote they all came down on. Like, he didn't expect it to be. And I feel bad for him in that sense, because he is the one that got this guy like caught and brought in. And so, of course, he feels somewhat responsible about this. And I just, you know, I don't envy him is where I come down on this. That I feel really bad for how, just the idea of getting anybody, and I was about to say getting anybody in trouble. This guy got himself in trouble. Dannyl is not responsible for the choices this man made. But the fact that he has to enforce this by bringing him in, and then they decide to execute him, which Dannyl, I don't think, really truly considered a possibility. I think he really thought that they were going to do something else. Because, of course, when he arrests this guy, the whole reveal about Akkarin's involvement with black magic hadn't happened yet. So he didn't know that there was going to be a trend happening already where they were dealing with this. And I think that he expected them to sort of let this guy off easy, because it was a book that, it was a subtle enough instruction of black magic that like Dannyl didn't even realize what he was reading until he was in the middle of it, and then was like, oh shit, I should not be reading this. So I really feel for him. I feel like this is going to weigh on his conscience a lot. And I think it should, because if it didn't at all, that would bother me about him. but I don't want it to in the way that I think it's gonna, because he is such a sensitive guy and does take this stuff so seriously, you know? All right, so we go to Sari for a little while. And Sari has been sort of coping with Savara being away and missing her. And, you know, he knows that she's doing the right thing and that he's doing the right thing. They're both being responsible for whatever situations they are in and made the right call here. But he's struggling with Takan a tiny bit, and struggling probably is too strong a word. It's just what it comes down to is Takan is really anxious being cooped up here. He's not allowed to, like, you know, go out and about the way that a regular person would. He's being kept secret here. Because if he were spotted by a Sachakan out on the street, I feel like that could be really bad for him. I'm not really sure what would happen or what they would assume or if anybody would recognize him, but evidently his race is very, like, recognizable, and that might cause him to be an object of suspicion just by default before they even know who he is. So yeah, and he doesn't want to talk about, like, who he was before working for Akkarin, which we know who he was, and it's understandable why he doesn't want to talk about it. He doesn't want to discuss what happened since becoming his servant, because obviously that's pretty confidential as well. Sari is able to eventually get him to just, like, kind of gossip about the magicians. But it's not really like I'm not sure if Sari had intended to get information out of him, so to speak, but I think that he just wants this guy to, like, you know, open up a little bit at all, and it doesn't seem like it's going to happen, and he's getting pretty frustrated. Meanwhile, too, Takan has that blood ring, and I had been hoping for more communication than it seems like he's actually getting. Akkarin had only communicated with Takan a few times in the last 8 days. When he did, Takan always reassured Sari that Sonea was alive and unharmed. Sari was both amused by and grateful for these updates on Sonea's welfare. Obviously, the servant had learned from Akkarin about Sari's former interest in Sonea. That's in the past, Sari thought wryly. Now I have Savara to mope about. Had Savara to mope about, he corrected. He was determined there would be no pining this time. We are both sensible adults, he told himself, with responsibilities that can't be neglected. So, Savara, it turns out, is there, after all, and he thinks, like, you know, well, she did say that she would come back at some point, and that it's just a visit, but it turns out she said that halfway to getting home, her people got in contact with her and told her that somebody should stay and witness the actual invasion. And that wording is just so, like, dire to me, you know? And I get what she's saying, but it just does really sound like, you know, their borders are going to be overrun. We know that it's just going to be a select few that sneak in. And those select few are going to be hella powerful. So that's plenty. It's just the wording of it just sounds like, whenever I hear the word invasion, I picture, like, this is messed up actually, but I picture, you know, in The Mummy, when he gets put in the sarcophagus and then they dump those buckets of beetles onto him and then they don't lock it. That's what I picture, is like a bunch of bugs, like, swarming something. It's really horrifying. But yeah, so she says, I said I would visit if I came back. It could be some time before the Achani come, and I might get bored while I'm waiting. He smiled. We can't have that. I did hope you would think so. What are you offering me in return, then? Her eyebrows rose. There's a price for visiting you now? Maybe. I just want a little advice. Oh, what advice? How can ordinary people kill magicians? She gave a short laugh. They can't. At least, not if a magician is competent and vigilant. How can we tell if he isn't? Her eyebrows rose. You are not joking. But of course you are not. He shook his head. She pursed her lips thoughtfully. So long as I don't reveal my people's hand in this, I see no reason why I shouldn't help you. and I'm sure you will find a way, even if I don't. You might get killed trying, though. If you keep me informed of what's going on in the city, I'll give you advice on killing magicians. Does that sound reasonable? And he agrees to that, and then she finishes with, I cannot tell you a sure way to kill an Achani, though. Only that they are no different from ordinary people in that they make mistakes. You can trick them if you know how. All it takes is courage, bluff, and some considerable risks. Sari smiled. Sounds like the sort of work I'm used to. Which, you know what? He's not wrong. That does sound like the exact sort of work that he's used to. And that gives me some hope that, like, he's going to be involved in the takedown of these people in the end. So then we go to Sonea and Akkarin. And they are traveling. They've managed to find this, like, kind of, what's the word I want? There's like a break in the rock that it's like a cave, but it's not covered on top. It's like a teeny tiny miniature valley, and she has to like push herself between a couple of really tight rocks in order to get in, tight enough that, like, when Akkarin tries to get in, he almost gets stuck. But yeah, there's water, there is a bird which Akkarin catches, and they're able to, like, eat that for dinner. There are berries that they can pick and nuts that they can pick. So it's a really nice little, like, respite from everything where they feel genuinely safe for a little bit, and they also were able to, like, have a full meal for the first time in ages, because they'd just been surviving on these little birds that weren't really, like, big enough to fill them up. So yeah, I like too that he gets, like, some stalks, for the berries, and, you know, he says something about how they're edible. They're not, like, delicious or anything, but that it's not smart to just live on meat. And I appreciated that, because yeah, that's something that, I know is technically true, but when you're in a situation where you don't, you know, I think that he knows maybe more than Sonea about, or is herbology the word? I'm wondering if he does know more than her, because I feel like her favorite class was healing, and I feel like you have to study a pretty good amount of that in order to do well in that class. But maybe not. I don't know. Botany. That's the word I want. But yeah, I if you don't know what's safe to eat, you don't want to take those kinds of risks, even though it's very dangerous to not eat anything green, because you need those kinds of vitamins to keep you healthy. And that's what led to people, like, having scurvy and shit. So yeah, I don't know. I liked this scene. I liked getting a little bit of, like, relief. This is something that I am always here for, because I am such a fan of creature comforts, and I'm such a fan of, like, a release from anxiety, at least temporarily, that when we have our crew that has been being hounded and pursued for, you know, several chapters in a row, when we get a moment for them to chill, eat, and genuinely, like, relax around each other, it's just a really huge relief to me. It's something that they do in a lot of different stories. It's just a temporary moment. You know, there was recently in the last Dresden Files book, he's, like, going. And then he gets a moment where he's, like, at a friend's house, and somebody drugs him because he won't rest. He refuses to do it. And they know that he needs it. So they drug him, and then he has to sleep. And when he wakes up, the person who drugged him is there making pancakes and, like, taking care of things. And it is the sort of thing that, like, as a reader, you want him to rest and you want him to eat, but you also do understand his urgency about it. And you're low-key relieved that somebody did this to him. Like, as much as I do not agree with fucking drugging somebody against their will, obviously, there are times with Harry Dresden where he does not do what's best for himself and everyone else. And somebody needs to step in and take care of him. So anyway, I just like moments like that where you've been very stressed as a reader for quite a while, and you are wishing that they could get a break. And then you get a little bit of one. And of course, it's followed up almost immediately by them very nearly getting caught, but they don't. So that was also kind of because I feel like these moments of getting a break are often almost immediately followed up by a complete fuck show. Like, it's just almost every time. For example, in Children of Blood and Bone, which I just covered, they get to go to like this party, and it's this big festival, and it's lovely. And of course, it winds up being broken up and like terrible things happen. And so you have this little moment of people enjoying themselves, and then it all goes to shit, and in a big way. I really kind of thought that's what was going to happen here. And I'm low-key relieved that it doesn't, but I'm also a little bit surprised and worried that that means things are going to go to hell in a bigger way than I even expected. Anyway, so let's see. I'm looking at this oh yeah, here it is. So first of all, we get Akkarin's first moment of like, he tells Sonea, "Thank you for coming with me." And she's really surprised that he's saying this now, and sort of like gets a little breathless because she's got this crush and she's like, you know, trying to read into this a little bit. And then he says, "I regret separating you from Rothan. I know he was more like a father than a teacher." It was necessary," he added softly. "I know," she whispered. "I understand." "But you didn't understand then," he said wryly. "You hated me." She chuckled. "That's true. I don't anymore." He said no more, but after a short pause, he rose and moved to the overhang and lay down on the grass bed. For a long time, she sat in darkness. So she's sitting there thinking about the fact that he's like saying some nice things to her and thinking about her and sort of like wanting to believe that this means that he cares about her, and then chiding herself for thinking that, you know, she just doesn't want to get her hopes up. And like, I think we've all been here, right? Where we think we are getting signals about something, but the signals we're getting are so exactly what we want to hear that we don't want to believe it because we are sure we're going to be like, get the rug pulled out from under us. Of course, I, as a reader, am like, obviously he is into you, Sonea. Can you not? And thankfully, this does get resolved pretty quickly. Because I was worried it was going to be the whole fucking book. It was just going to be these longing glances and her like wanting to say something and not, and misinterpreting things and yada, yada, yada. But anyway, so here he lays down and she's keeping watch, and then she hears this like growl. And when she goes and checks on him, it turns out that it's him and he's having a nightmare and he's making a lot of noise in his sleep. And she knows that he doesn't really like it when she wakes him up because when she wakes him up from a nightmare, because it seems really like he doesn't like her seeing him weak. And he feels like that's what seeing him in that position looks like to her, that it makes him look weak. But, you know, he's making a lot of noise. It's echoing around the valley. Like, she kind of has to. So she goes to wake him up, and he like uses a spell to like throw her, and she's okay, but he really like, you know, where it's like this, she felt a force slam into her, throwing her up into the air. Something hard slammed into her back, and she dropped to the ground. Pain lanced down her arms and legs. And yeah, when she tells him, "Well, you were having a nightmare," he's like, "Well, you know, that happens. There's not a reason to wake me up." And she's like, "No, you were being really loud." So then he says, "Well, all right, fine. You go to sleep and I'll stay up and watch." And she's like, "You barely slept at all, first of all. And when it's my turn to take watch, I know that you're not going to wake me up." And he gives her his word that he will. So let's see. Here it is. Oh, yeah. So this moment. He leaned forward and offered her a hand. Taking it, she let him haul her to her feet. A bright light dazzled her, and she realized that the rising sun was just beginning to crest the rock wall at the base of the valley. Akkarin stilled. Sensing that something had caught his attention, she squinted at him, but he was a dark shape against the brightness. Instinctively, she sought him with her mind instead. At once, she saw an image. A face framed by hair shining in the morning sunlight. Eyes so dark, and pale, perfect skin. It was her own face, but it was unlike any reflection she had seen in a mirror. Her eyes held a mysterious shine. Her hair seemed to ripple as if moving in a breeze, and her lips surely did not curve so invitingly. He snatched his hand away and took a step back. This is how he sees me, she thought suddenly. There was no mistaking the desire she had sensed. She felt her own heart racing. All this time I resisted because I thought it was just me, she thought. And so has he. So, she goes up to him and kisses him. And he tries, he says stop, but he doesn't actually, step away from her. And she asks why, and he says this is wrong. And she's like, well, we both feel the same way. What's the problem? And he says, first of all, I'm 13 years older than you. Secondly, I'm your guardian. And she says in response to the 13-year age difference, women in houses are matched with older men all the time. Much older men. Some when they're as young as 16. I'm nearly 20. I am your guardian, he reminded her sternly. She could not help smiling. Not anymore. But if we return to the guild, will we cause a scandal? You speak as if we'll go back and everything will be the same again. Even if we return, nothing will ever be as it was for us. I'm a black magician. So are you. So it comes down to here. I'm going to read this and I'm going to ask you guys what you think of this. So here it is. He says, either of us could die in the next few weeks. She nodded. I know. I'd be happier knowing you were safe. Sonea narrowed her eyes at him. He smiled. No, I will not start that argument again, but you test my loyalties, Sonea. She frowned, not understanding. He reached out and ran a finger across her brow. It doesn't matter. It's too late anyway. I started to fail that test the night you killed the Achani. She blinked in surprise. So what does he mean you test my loyalties? Basically, is he saying that, if it comes down to Kirelia being safe or you being safe, that I would pick you over Kirelia? I think that's what he's saying here. But I'm worried about that. I don't want that to be true, even though I probably would feel the same way about Owen, I guess I don't want it to come down to that kind of decision for either one of them. And because I want Kirelia to come first for the sake of the story, but I want each other to come first because, romance. And as much as I don't love romance in most stories, there is something very sad and cynical about having to sacrifice somebody that you care about for the sake of the greater good that I don't want to be put through. And I don't think they do either. But yeah, so I was just at least glad because they kiss again here and then it's over. And I'm like, thank God they at least came to this realization, because I could not take much more of her chiding herself and talking to herself about how she just wants it to be this. And so that's what she's seeing. I just couldn't do it. So I'm really glad that that's not what's happening here. So 25 starts off with Rothan, and he is in his merchant's apparel, which is a little less comfortable than the robes that he normally wears. And Raven is with him, and Raven is acting as his assistant. And they stopped at an inn the night before, and Raven got really, really drunk. And Rothan is sort of like low-key wondering if he's playing his part well enough. Is Raven, like, Raven seems more convincing, but at the same time, he's like, maybe I'm supposed to be like the sensible one. And Raven's the cut-up. And he's thinking about this stuff to himself, and the driving, like they're using Gorin, which are basically oxen, instead of horses to draw their carriage or their wagon. And they are very slow moving. So Rothan is just feeling kind of impatient at the moment. And they're heading towards the southern pass, which is the one that Raven seems to be the most confident the Achani are going to try to use. Because Raven is obviously one smart cookie. It would be several days before he faced his son, because he's thinking about how Dorian is down near the pass, watching the road, and that he's going to run into him, and he's going to have to tell Dorian what's going on, and that Dorian is not going to be happy to hear that his father is risking himself in this way. I am going to guess that Dorian is going to insert himself into this what's the word I want? Enterprise? Scheme? Because he cares about Sonea. So we'll see how that goes. Raven had said it took 6 or 7 days to reach the South Pass by cart. By then, Sonea will have been in Sachaka for 15 days, Rothan thought, if she stays alive that long. He had been relieved to hear from Lorlan that Akkarin had contacted the higher magicians now 5 days ago. Sonea had been alive. Lorlan had also described an overheard discussion between two Sachakans that disturbed Rothan greatly. Whether the strangers were Ichani or not, they clearly wanted Akkarin and Sonea dead. They called them the Karelians, Lorlan had said. I hope this doesn't mean they'll treat all Karelians entering Sachaka the same way. Karelian merchants have been making the journey to and from Arvis safely for years, though, and say they see no reason why that might have changed recently. Just be careful. So they're heading out, and they get overtaken by reinforcements, magicians who are being sent to the fort. And Raven advises Rothan to pull off to the side and keep his head down, but also gawk, because that's what they're going to expect. The first to pass the cart was Lord Yikmo, the warrior who had been Sonea's special tutor last year. The magician did not even glance at Rothan and Raven as he passed. And all in all, they count 22. Raven says, that'll double what's at the fort. Is the guild sending magicians to the South Pass? I don't know. Good. Rothan looked at Raven, amused. The less you know, the less an Ichani can learn from you, the spy said. Rothan nodded. I do know that the South Pass is being watched. If the Ichani enter there, the guild will be alerted. Those at the fort should have time enough to ride back to Imardin and join the guild. The distance is about the same from either pass. If I were these Ichani, I would use the South Pass. There are no magicians there, and no fort, so they can enter without using any power in fighting. That doesn't bode well for us, I'm afraid. Though these Ichani do not know how to fight as one. If the entire guild faces them, it may be able to kill off one or two. If the guild is split, however, there is no danger of that. The fort may be the better option. And then Raven is like, well, also maybe the Ichani aren't even real. Or at least potentially. And I'm just curious about, how long it's going to take before they start to believe this shit, because I'm getting impatient. I understand that they don't have a lot of evidence at this point, but I want them to, understand how convoluted an excuse it is that, oh yeah, Akkarin just made this all up to justify learning black magic. Guys, come on. Does that fucking ring true at all? Get out of here. I'm just wanting this to be... I want everybody to be on the same page. And Raven straight up asks Rothan, do you think that Sonea might be in love with Akkarin? which I love the fact that Raven is like brand new on the scene and he's already calling this shit like completely accurately. And Rothan is so irritated by this insinuation. No, she hated him enough to learn forbidden magic and follow him into exile to ensure he survived long enough for, as she put it, the guild to come to its senses. If she believes these Achani exist, it would have been easy for him to convince her to do all those things for the sake of the guild. Why would he if the Achani weren't real? So she would follow him. He needs her. What for? Her strength? Why teach her black magic then? That gained him nothing. I don't know. She said she asked him to. Perhaps he could not refuse without losing her support. So, now she's potentially as powerful as he. If she discovered he was lying, why wouldn't she return to Imardin or at least tell the guild? Rothan closed his eyes. Just because. I know this is distressing, Raven said in a low voice, but we must examine all the possible motivations and consequences before we meet them. And so Rothan, it comes down to Rothan being like, well, just because she's learned black magic doesn't mean that she's more powerful than him or that she could be an adversary of his. And I guess, but like Rothan really is burying his head in the sand and he's going to have to fucking he's going to have a come to Jesus moment is what I'm thinking. Okay, here we go. Akkarin and Sonea together again. They find another little valley. It's actually the river. This isn't like a little hidden area like the one that they had found before. This is a deep valley with like a waterfall, and it feels sort of secluded. It turns out it's not as secluded as they thought. But they go down there. And she decides that she's going to, like, bathe and is getting into the water. Akkarin is able to, like, actually dive in a little further down because it is much deeper than she had thought. And when he comes up, he goes underneath this waterfall and she follows him over there. And it turns out that there's, like, a shelf of stone back there. Well, they're back there flirting, relaxing for a second. And then she sort of like moves aside a bit of the waterfall to look through. And it turns out that there is somebody out there. And let's see. Magic has its uses, she thought. A cold, cramped space can be made warm and cozy. Muscles tired from walking can be revived. To think I once would have given this away out of hatred for magicians. If I had, I wouldn't be with Akkarin now. No, she thought, as reality struck hard. I'd be a blissfully ignorant slum dweller, completely unaware that immensely powerful magicians were about to invade my home. Magicians who will make the guild look humble and generous. So yeah, that's what she's thinking to herself. And I'm like, you know, it's phrased in such a way. It says reality struck hard, as if she was really idealizing her situation and that she suddenly got a clear, like, reminder that life could have been better for you if you had given everything up. I don't see that what she described is better. I'd be a blissfully ignorant slum dweller, unaware that magicians were about to invade. You're talking about dwelling in the slums, which is no bueno. I know you're used to it, but still, it's not great. Ignorant doesn't mean that you're unaffected. It just means you don't know it's coming. So, you know, just stop thinking things like this, lady. Like, it's not better. You don't wish anything different. The situation that you're in, armed with some knowledge and some skill, is the ideal. You're in a good spot. Just, you know, I just get frustrated with Sonea sometimes. So it turns out the person standing outside is Parika. So let's see. I only sought to be ready for your return, a woman said meekly. See, I have gathered stingberries and taro nuts. You should not have left the pass. Rico is there. Rico is asleep. Then punish Rico. There was a wordless protest, then a thump. Forgive me, master, the woman whimpered. Get up. I don't have time for this. I haven't slept for 2 days. Are we going straight into Curalia then? No. Not until Kariko is ready. I want to be well rested before then. Yeah, so it turns out, like, thankfully, she and Akkarin don't have packs. They don't have anything except their boots that they left, and Akkarin actually took the time to hide them. So thankfully, there's nothing out there giving away the fact that they are here. And I keep thinking that Pariko is the woman, but I guess Pariko's actually the guy, and the woman is the one who headed north. But yeah, he's in front of us now, she said. Yes, but it sounds as if Parika is the only Achani at the pass. It also sounds as if Kariko plans to invade in the next few days. I tried to reach Lorland, but he isn't wearing the ring. He hasn't put it on in days. So we wait until Parika enters Curalia, then follow? Or we try to sneak past him tonight while he sleeps. It isn't far to the coast from here. From there it would only be a few days' ride to Imardine. If you were to go that way, I would know. Sonea was surprised by the force of her own voice. I'm not leaving you. His expression grew stern. The guild needs you, Sonea. They don't have time to learn black magic from my books. They need someone who can train them and fight for them. If we both go through the pass, we might both be caught and killed. At least if you went south, one of us might reach Curalia. Sonea pulled away. It made sense, but she didn't like it. So yeah, then he says, well, she tries to be like, well, but you keep taking my strength every day and you need it. And he's like, 1 day's worth of strength isn't going to make any difference. And 4 or 5 days will make little difference. If the guild accept my help, I will have hundreds of magicians to draw from. If they don't, they are doomed anyway. She shook her head slowly. You're the valuable one. You have the knowledge and the skill and the power we've collected. You should go south. If it's safer, why don't we both go south? Akkarin picked up his shirt and sighed. Because I would not get there in time. She stared at him. So I wouldn't either. No, but if I failed, you could help what was left of the guild regain Curalia. The rest of the allied lands will not like having Sachakan black magicians as neighbors. This whole thing, I don't know. I'm a little confused by this. Okay, so I'm going to say, like, go back and reread this again. If you go south, one of us might reach Curalia. But he says might reach. He doesn't say, like, might reach them in time. He sort of, I guess, it's a foregone conclusion that they're going to get there after the Achani are able to, like, levy their attack. Then when he says 1 more day's strength from you will make no difference. I could never have gained enough power in these last weeks to face an Achani. I'd need 10 or 20 of you. It would not be 1 more day. It will take another 4 or 5 days to get from the pass to Imardine. And then when he says 4 or 5 days will make little difference. If the guild accept my help, I will have hundreds of magicians to draw from. But the thing is, like, he will have hundreds of magicians to draw from, but don't they need more than just their crew of magicians in order to stand up to the Achani? I feel like they have to reach outside of the guild for this to work. I don't know. He's presenting things in such a way that doesn't feel like it's actually enough to solve the problem here, because I feel like he doesn't want to look at the actual need in a way that's, like, genuinely acknowledging how out of proportion the fight will be. And I don't know. I just feel like there's something here that's, like, a tiny bit in denial. It would be easier for me to face the Ichani if I did not have to worry about what they might do to you if I fail. And she retorts with basically like, well, what about me worrying about you? The whole, the back and forth that we've seen before, pretty much. And then says, we are going to face these risks and these fights together. Between the two of us, we'll come up with an alternative. So we see like what that winds up being a little bit later. For now, we are going back to Lorelin. He is writing all of these letters because they, bless them, can't use mental communication. And so he's going through a lot of ink and pens and parchment, actually having to write out messages to everyone. And it's taking a lot more time also. Apparently he can't just copy paste. I wonder if he could. I wonder if that's something they could come up with. And Austin is talking to Lorelin about how he feels bad that he didn't like step in for Sonea a little bit sooner, that he knew Sonea was really unhappy, and that he could see it was clearly Akkarin that was the reason for her being unhappy. And that, at this point, because of the way that she defied the king, she's put herself in this position where she's going to, if she were to come back, if it were to turn out that all this stuff was true, she still wouldn't be like welcomed back into the guild and allowed to, rejoin the novices and continue her schooling. Like that, the fact that she defied the king makes her dangerous. So yeah, that would not probably happen. And Austin's also asking who Rothan or Lorelin thinks they're going to vote as High Lord to replace Akkarin. Even if Akkarin comes back, even if it turns out he was right, he's practicing black magic. Nobody's going to be okay with him what's the word I want? Retaining his place as High Lord. And Lorelin basically is like, I don't know who's going to take his spot. I really don't want to fucking think about it right now. Can we please not? And also is wondering if he can go and like grab the blood ring and communicate with Akkarin real quick, because he's super curious about what's going on. And he considers doing it and not telling any of the other magicians. And I wish that he would, because as we know, there's some very like serious shit happening. But he doesn't do it. And on the one hand, I want him to, because I want him to get this information. On the other hand, I kind of appreciate that he like is listening to his friends and is like, no, that would be a stupid idea. I'm not going to do that. I'm kind of like, you know what? Good on you, buddy. Because it just sets a dangerous precedent. All right. So let's see. Chapter 26. Sari is considering telling the other thieves about what's going on with the magicians that are potentially coming through, but he really doesn't have any proof yet, so he doesn't think that that it would be a good idea. And then he goes and talks to Takan, who did hear from Akkarin, and he says, he tells Sari the whole story, which of course he doesn't realize how much Sari already knows, because Savara has told him. So he has to act like this is all like brand new information. And if they were free, why did they continue to do what their masters wanted? Takan looked down at the floor. Servitude is a hard habit to break, especially when you are born to it. And the spies feared the guild as much as they feared the Ichani. They saw only two choices: to hide in the enemy's land or to return to Sechaka. Until Akkarin and Sonea were so publicly exiled, most Sechakans believed the guild still used higher magic. This conversation was one that I felt like did not need to be here in a lot of ways. I have to admit this, that I like Takan and Sari talking to each other, and I would have liked it better if we actually got to see their conversations that were like more inconsequential in terms of being directly related to the plot, because I want a reinforcement of like they're being allies, but I don't need to hear Takan informing Sari of all of the stuff that we already know about. You know, we already know all of this, and having it repeated explicitly, especially when we also know that Sari knows all of this, doesn't seem necessary. And it ends with, Akkarin contacted me and asked me to tell you that they plan to invade in the next few days, and you have to warn the guild. The message must be anonymous, but its recipient will know from whom the content will know from the content who it is from. Akkarin has told me what it should contain. So we could have skipped a lot of that and kind of just gotten down to brass tacks with this information. You do not seem alarmed to learn that your country is about to face a war. Sari shrugged. Oh, I am, but I'm not surprised. I had a feeling something big was about to happen. And when Takan asks, are you concerned? Sari says, why would I be concerned? It's magician's business, which just... I can't tell if he's just saying that right now, but he has to know that's not true. Like, Sari, have you been fucking listening, dude? They're going to try and take over the country. Like, what are you not understanding about this? But yeah. So that at least I feel like they're getting a message out, so that's good. But it's, you know, whether or not they're going to believe it. Takan is assuring him, well, they will because of what you put in the message. But, you know, we'll see. Oh, right. Okay, so then we go to Dannyl, who asks Saren, like, are we going to continue to build the lookout? And I'm like, dude, I can't believe that you guys have forgotten about this. Because Saren's just like, yeah, it'll keep us occupied but then it won't matter. Like, what do you mean unless? You guys need a lookout if you're going to be going to war. And even if you're not, y'all had already agreed on this project. Like, just yes. And then this is when he has the conversation with Ferrand, who is in novice's robes and just still not looking great. The effects of that poison are lingering quite a bit. And they don't know who poisoned him. They have not been able to find this out, but it's very obvious that Lady Venara is not going to rest until she figures it out. She takes it, I think, as like a personal affront that somebody managed to do this and get away with it. And Ferrand is, this is when he tells him about how he thinks that the guild is looking to punish somebody for black magic since they can't punish Akkarin. And is talking, you know, to his sister. And she grieves, but the children will give her something to hold on to. I will miss them all. Yeah, because her husband's being killed. So, yikes. I kind of wonder if that's going to happen. I don't know. We'll see. I feel like that Dem might be a bad guy. I feel like this might come up. I don't know. We'll see. Because he has read the black magic. He might be able to figure out how to, like, escape. I don't know. So, Sonea and Akkarin, wrapping this up, they carry on this little plan that they have. They're walking, and then they allow themselves to be spotted. They can see Rico, who is on watch, and he has had all of his like warm clothing taken away so that the cold keeps him awake, because like we heard that he fell asleep one time. So they let Rico see them. He like runs off to inform somebody, and then they like hide right there. But Akkarin he like uses magic to send sounds and lights out in a distant area to make the Ichani and Rico think that he and Sonea are far away. It was fading as if moving away. She looked at Akkarin, guessing that he was the source of the light. His forehead was creased with a frown of concentration. They descended to the road and then hurried on toward the pass. At every step, Sonea was sure they would catch up with the slave, but it wasn't until several hundred paces that they saw the man ahead of them. So there is, Rico is like heading out ahead of them, and he sits down next to a young woman who I'm assuming is the woman slave that we heard talking when they were in the waterfall. And this part is a little tough for her because Akkarin says, I really should take these slaves away from Parika because they're going to be used as a source of power. And we can't allow Parika to hold on to this power. So he kills the woman really quickly. Sonea like goes after Rico, and let's see. I'm trying to find exactly how this went down because I just read this, but I have already forgotten. Oh, right. He runs and like falls off the cliff because it's very dark, and you know they're on the edge of like several precipices out here. So Akkarin doesn't get a chance to like pull power from this kid, which I feel a little bit bad for Rico. That sucks. And they head out and they're going like really pretty quickly. And she wonders to herself whether or not continuing to heal herself when she's pushing it physically is actually maybe harmful for her body long term. I have to imagine it's not, or we would have heard about that, but we'll see. What if he follows us? He won't. He won't enter Karelia until Kariko does. What now? Sleep, Sonea. I will watch. We'll decide what to do next tomorrow. So yeah, that is the end of that section. Oh, I'm sorry. Martin is over here commenting and I didn't see it until just now. I had the book up in front of me. I thought he meant loyalty to proprietary, if that makes sense. Oh, to propriety. Okay. I see what you're saying. Maybe. But I have to wrap this up. So guys, thank you very much for hanging out with me. Thank you again to Ashleigh for commissioning this episode. I just really like, now that this invasion is going to be underway, I'm very eager to see how this goes. So we shall see. And if you're interested in commissioning anything, just go to unspoiledpodcast.com/shop. Thank you guys so much. And toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.